Everyone, as alluded by my colleague, my name is Haitamba Kombili. I am part of the research team at the Africa Center of Excellence in Blockchain Research, and I'll be your moderator for this chat on what exactly is the role of blockchain in the transformation of Africa's economy. So I'm joined tonight by our guest speaker, Mr. Advit Nath, who will briefly tell us a bit about his background, and then we can dive into this exciting chat. Over to you, Mr. Advit.
Thank you so much, Pombili, Salim, and Simolewa. I really appreciate being invited, and it's great to see the energy on blockchain in Africa. It's super exciting to see some of the real world cases. No, you've really said enough. Honestly, the real heroes are the ones building real solutions. So we can go straight into the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. With a bio like that, I guess we can expect so much in today's conversation. So stay tuned and grab a piece of paper just to take note of what you might find that you can follow up or questions that you can have afterwards. So our first question, with regards to the role of blockchain in Africa, so how do you see blockchain technology driving economic transformation in Africa?
Yes, thank you, Pombili, for the question. So I grew up in Africa. I've been out of Africa for some years now, but my first 16 years were in Zambia. And I knew right from the first days in Zambia that really there's so much potential in Africa. And now I would like to see that it goes much more beyond potential. And we're now seeing that Africa is really a true engine. But let me start by sharing an incredible statistic that I heard on a podcast just yesterday by the Financial Times. And I confirmed the statistic. And what it says is that by 2025, the total number of working age people in sub-Saharan Africa will be larger than the working age population in the entire developed world. That includes North America, Western Europe, and East Asia. Now let that sink in for one moment, that there's more working age people than the entire developed world combined. So my question then is, why is Africa not already the world's next economic superpower? And my answer is that it should be, and it will be. So that statistic points to reality. And that is, there is a big, massive, untapped economic engine, but it's currently constrained by outdated systems, by inefficient financial infrastructure, and less global integration. So, while that's the case, I still feel Africa has one major advantage over the developed economies. And that is that it doesn't need to follow the traditional models of development. It can leapfrog outdated systems and build modern, decentralized, blockchain-powered economies from the ground up. So let's talk about that digital revolution for a moment. Developed economies are locked into this old banking system. I lived in New York for 9 years, and I can tell you that the banking system is completely outdated. Banks were using magnetic strips on their credit and debit cards. At that time, Europe was using chip and pin technology, and Africa was way ahead with mobile technology. But Africa has this unique opportunity to build these digital solutions from scratch and using blockchain and Web3 as the backbone of these. So what are some of the areas I would say that are key for Africa's digital transformation? One is that financial inclusion has to be on the top. We're banking the unbanked with blockchain. Two is cross-border trade and payments. Three is land identity management to secure land ownership. Four is property ownership and legal identity, which is essential for financial stability. And five is supply chain transparency and trade. This eliminates the middle people, reduces any corruption, and brings efficiencies. And sixth and last is data sovereignty and infrastructure, basically keeping African data in Africa. So Africa must own its digital future, and blockchain provides those tools to do it. So if I can summarize I think Africa has this unique opportunity to leapfrog the old economy and build a digital-first economy using blockchain. And if I can end with one expectation, and that is, the question is not if Africa will lead in blockchain adoption, it's how quickly will it happen?
Interesting, mind-blowing statistics there. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. It's interesting. I think one should definitely pick up a thing or two about that, and definitely look into really understanding blockchain from that perspective. Now, in terms of transparency and accountability, you've led a project, right, while you were at UNIFAD called Trace, to bring transparency to find flows in development. Could you tell us about the project? How can this model be adapted to address challenges that are unique to Africa? Like you mentioned, we are not like the developed countries. What are those unique features of Africa?
Yeah, sure. So in IFAD, which is the international organization that's like the Agricultural Development Bank for the UN, we were working with smallholder farmers. There's over 500 million smallholder farmers. As you know, food insecurity is a big issue in the world. Inflation is causing food prices to be extremely high, even for basic goods, so people cannot make ends meet. Farmers who basically provide 1/3 of the world's food, smallholder farmers. And in fact, in many places, like in many countries in Africa, it's actually up to 80% of the food that comes is from smallholder farmers. In fact, 2 meals of the day that you eat is probably from smallholder farmers, if not all the meals that you eat. So imagine how important these smallholder farmers are. But with the pandemic that happened a few years ago, farmers were struggling. They were not able to feed themselves, so they were selling their assets. Fuel was very expensive, so transportation, fuel for tractors was a big problem. So I traveled a lot in the world as in my role supporting smallholder farmers, and I saw some of these issues firsthand. So one of the challenges we internally had discussed was how can we make things more efficient? How can we bring more funding to support smallholder farmers? And one of the solutions we thought was through blockchain using a technology that was called Trace. And Trace was the ability to trace money from donor to farmer and agri-goods from the supply chain, from the beginning origin to destination. And then we also innovated to try and use digital money to try and move digital stablecoin across borders to see if that can work for smallholder farmers as well. So these were piloted in over 8 countries. I was in Rwanda last year, some months ago, and we piloted some of these projects, and it was very successful because our first project in Kenya showed how we could trace $100 million climate smart cereal program from donor to farmer. And that 100 million we were able to put on one piece of paper after implementing Trace to show where the money went, where it started, where it went, through which intermediaries it went. And we realized actually there's a lot of efficiencies we could gain. So when we went through this process, we were able to show that we could reduce waste, we could follow the dollar, show donors where the money went, and we could also see agriculture goods, so we can then make sure that goods go to their intended destination, fresh, and the produce is also managed in terms of supply chains. Another great example of how blockchain can be used to support smallholder farmers and business in general.
Okay, in short, there is transparency on the blockchain, and Trace is a proof of that, because you have used and you know what exactly goes on, and you're able to trace everything that is traded on the blockchain through Trace. So in terms of scalability, scaling blockchain solutions based on your experience with Trace and other solutions, what are the key challenges and opportunities in scaling blockchain solutions across Africa?
So thank you very much for the question. And I also see some questions in the chat. So happy to also respond to those during the question period, as well as during afterwards, to share some information if you'd like to know more about Trace or any of the topics we talk about today. And it is about transparency. It's also about business efficiency. So we use smart contracts to speed up payment for vendors, for example. That there's a lot of opportunities with blockchain technology beyond the traceability piece, which is one element of it as well. So you asked me about some of the challenges, and I think that blockchain in Africa is not theoretical anymore. It's really solving real world problems across multiple sectors, from finance to agriculture to digital identity to anti-corruption efforts. As Africa's leapfrogs on that traditional banking we talked about, blockchain is emerging as that trustless, efficient, and scalable solution to some of the continent's most challenging economic challenges. So let's explore three major areas where blockchain is making real world impact today. So first is on financial inclusion and cross-border payments. The problem is Africa's financial system is expensive, it's slow and inaccessible. Africa loses $5 billion annually in remittance fees alone, making it one of the most expensive regions in the world to send money, which makes zero sense to me because in terms of risk, it's actually much lower risk than many other regions. So we really have this disconnect between how capital flows into Africa and the perception of risk in Africa. But blockchain is fixing some of these examples. So for example, Yellow Card is a good example in Pan-Africa that colleagues Salim and others, I'm sure, in Nigeria are very familiar with. I met the CEO in Davos a few weeks ago while I was there for the World Economic Forum meetings, and it's a fascinating story. And what Yellow Card does as one example is it basically uses digital assets as a remittance platform, and it operates in about 16 African countries, I understand, and it cuts cross-border transaction fees by 70%. So it's very, very efficient, effective, and that's why people are flocking towards a solution like this. Another example that's Kenya-based is Chimone and BitPesa. I think it's also Nigeria. These platforms use stablecoin, which is going to become very important, I think, in 2025, certainly, and beyond, to provide that instant, low-cost remittance services that bypasses the whole very expensive SWIFT payment network that we have. Another example is Fonbank. This is in Ghana, perhaps Nigeria also. It converts prepaid mobile airtime into digital assets, and that allows unbanked users to store and send value without a bank account. So why does it matter? Because more money stays within African families instead of getting lost into fees. Another example is supply chain and agriculture finance. So 60% of Africa's workforce relies on agriculture, and yet farmers have trouble accessing credit and fair pricing. And this is what I saw in my travels across IFAD as well. There's also the example of Twiga Foods, which is in Kenya, and that uses blockchain credit scoring as an example to help smallholder farmers access fair loans. There's a really great one called Hello Tractor. When I was in Rwanda a few months ago, and I traveled all over Rwanda, and it's an absolutely stunning country. And I remember the tools, the Hello Tractor was used effectively in eastern Rwanda, where it's very dry. And it facilitates this convenient, affordable tractor services. So farmers can get access to tractors like the Uber of tractors, and they can also get additional income, turning their tractors into smart tractors. So why does all this matter? Because blockchain gives farmers financial identities, fair market access, better financing options, and that helps with food security and income security for them as well. The third and last one I'll mention is digital identity, and that helps with anti-corruption as well. With over 500 million Africans do not have a formal ID, and that's 1 in 3 people on the continent. Now that restricts access to finance, to healthcare, to education. Ghana has a really interesting one. It's a blockchain land registry it uses blockchain to secure land ownership records. It reduces any fraud and increases property rights, security for people who own land. There's another one in West Africa. It's called Jerurida, I think it is. Jelurida, I think is the right pronunciation. And that is digital identification and credential verification as well. So why it matters is because secure digital IDs empower citizens, it reduces corruption, and it also helps with the economic participation.
Mind blowing. And you can't argue these facts because there's you provide data to actually back it up. It's mind blowing. So we're gonna look at NutriChain. So the project in Zambia. What is the inspiration behind it, and how far has the project come?
Yes, thank you for the question. And this one's very close to my heart because, as I mentioned, I grew up in Zambia, and I recently made a change in my career. For 25 years, I was an employee. I worked diligently, day 9 to 5, or maybe more like 8 to 8. But I changed my job because I felt that I want to make more impact in the world, and that's when I started my own companies. One's a nonprofit because the objective is to give back. And one of the first projects that I had worked with one of my business partners with to create was something called NutriChain Zambia. And the objective and inspiration was to try and support school feeding. My mother's a teacher, and she was a teacher in Zambia. And she was there working tirelessly to try and support children to have a better future with all the other teachers there in Kitwe, in the Copperbelt province in Zambia. And so for me, if there's a way we could support the next generation, because we talked about the economic engine of Africa, and who's the future of Africa? The children are the future. So one thing that was really bothered me when I heard the statistic is that in Zambia, the vast majority of children don't have a school feeding program, really 75%. And so the 25% that do, it's not even nutritious because it's all based on maize meal, mini meal. So this is a problem because that affects attendance in school, it affects just general health, and then outcomes of learning as well. So to me, then I started digging a little deeper into this, and we found that there's a key problem with traditional school feeding systems. There's lack of transparency. Donors and governments cannot track where school feeding funds are spent, for example. There could be some leakages in funds, areas of inefficiency. Intermediaries can divert funds, for example, because before they reach schools, there's the nutritional value element. Many of the school meals are not nutritious, as I mentioned. They lack proteins, vitamins, fresh produce. And then there's the inefficiencies of payments. The vendor payments are made not on time, slowly, by cash, etc. So the meal providers face delayed or missing payments, and then they don't want to get involved in the programs. So the solution we had was to tokenize school meals on a blockchain. And we have a local partner in Zambia as well. And we have an international consortium of partners. And the idea is to revolutionize school meals distribution by ensuring that every meal is tracked, every vendor gets paid fairly based on smart contracts. We add more local vendors as we go on so that we eliminate international vendors. We go for local where the food is produced. It's locally grown, and every dollar reaches the intended purpose, reaches the recipient for the intended purpose. So how it works is that instead of transferring cash, which can be misused, lost, not traceable, NutriChain issues a digital meal token on a blockchain. Each meal represents, so each token represents a meal that a child is entitled to receive, and all those statistics are done up front, so we know how many children are attending school. The schools receive a token based on the verified school student enrollment that prevents fraud. Then smart contracts are used for the vendor payments. So the vendors who provide the meals only receive payments once the meals have been confirmed and delivered. And there's also ways that you can build smart contracts to incentivize issuing the meals, so the tokens don't carry forward after 2 weeks. And when they reach a certain amount, then they max out. So there's no incentive to collect meals, for example. it's very controlled. And these smart contracts automatically execute payments as well upon verification. So it eliminates the need of any middle people. So the schools, so this ensures the schools, the vendors, the children all receive what they are owed transparently and efficiently. And there's live dashboards and real-time monitoring. So governments, donors, NGOs can monitor in real time what's happening. And the data on the meal distribution, the fund allocation, the program efficiency, we want it to be publicly accessible while protecting, and this is extremely important for us, the confidentiality of the students. Any information that's personal data is not visible. It's not even collected, in fact. And the safety of the children is the most important thing. So we manage the confidentiality, non-collection, and ensuring that we're aligned to even the best of personal data privacy, which is the EU's GDPR regulation. So the communities, the parents, the schools, they can also track the meals. They can see that everything's going according to what they expect. And in terms of where we are now, we are in the pilot phase. So we've just started since I've just been doing this for a few months now. And but we already have a solution that has been tried and tested in another region, and it's now working effectively in 9 cities. So now we're moving. What we're trying to do is adapt it to the rural environment, and that's the true challenge for us. But it's something that we're working with. And today I just had a meeting with my business partner, and we're moving forward quite quickly on this. The idea is that we demonstrate the ability of blockchain to be used in this pilot phase with 1,000 students, and then we can get government buy-in, and then we can proceed to scale nationwide and potentially continent-wide as well. And our vision is that we see blockchain not just as a technology, but a tool for impact. And by ensuring the funds reach their intended purpose, the participants, then corruption is eliminated and children receive their meals. And this can transform the school feeding programs in general. We'll also be written up in the Global Blockchain Business Council Handbook for Impact Solutions. And the big picture is that a new change can demonstrate that we can use blockchain to solve real-world problems, not just in finance, but in education as well, and food security as well. So hopefully this is a model that can be successful, scaled up to millions of people and children in Zambia and beyond. And hopefully that will also help support a brighter future for Africa.
That's quite an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing. And also you have touched on tokenization, which was going to be my next question. Unless you have a bit more to elaborate on that, but I think you have covered it in that one go. So maybe we can move on to the next one, which is now in terms of boosting financial inclusion, looking at the smallholder farmers and the unbanked population, right? How can blockchain solutions like yours, such as Trace or the NutriChain, empower them?
Yes, and happy to come back also more on tokenization in some of my responses in the future. So I think in terms of financial inclusion, Africa's landscape in the financial sense is fragmented, expensive, and it excludes millions of people. So this traditional banking that fails to reach a large portion of the population, sending money across borders remains one of the most costly things we talked about. So if blockchain can help make things cheaper, enable faster cross-border remittances, maybe stablecoin-based savings, mobile-first financial services can be then the norm. So these innovations, we hope, can bypass the inefficiencies of those traditional banking models and give access to people in terms of financial security. So I think banking the unbanked with stablecoins and digital wallets will be one key thing. It's still 57% of Africa remains unbanked, meaning that the population cannot access savings loans and make digital payments even. And then you have the other examples, which Africa is a leader in digital payments. So I think rural areas get left behind a lot, and bank penetration is much lower there as well, with many villages lacking the basic banking branches or ATMs even. And then another issue is recently, especially, is local currencies suffer from inflation and volatility. So that makes it difficult for people to save. So imagine having your savings in a stable coin USDC in your digital wallet, then you can always convert the US dollars as you need them, but it's not losing value by the day. So what we're seeing is that more people can send and receive money instantly, especially because of the very high mobile phone penetration in Africa. It reduces reliance on that slow, expensive remittance service. And I mentioned the stable coins being really a very useful tool to provide that safe way to store value. Another thing is DeFi, or decentralized finance, and blockchain-based banking services. So this helps empower Africa's informal economy as well. It gives millions of people the first chance to build financial security. So a few questions I'll be watching for closely in the future of inclusion in Africa is, will governments embrace stablecoins and blockchain-based banking? Can mobile-first decentralized finance scale to reach millions more? Will traditional banks integrate with blockchain? Or will new players dominate the financial sector? So these are the questions that I think we'll be really watching for in the coming year in particular. And the answers will determine how blockchain shapes the future of financial access across Africa.
Great. So moving on to local innovation and collaboration, how can African innovators and governments collaborate with global blockchain initiatives to maximize impact? Since it's one of the most talked about technology currently, so governments need to be informed and they need to make the right decisions to collaborate better. And so what's your take on that?
So while blockchain is poised to revolutionize finance and trade in Africa, its adoption faces some roadblocks. And I think the challenges range from regulatory uncertainty and the infrastructure limitations we talked about, to banking resistance, to some of the security risks that are there, the public skepticism as well, with some of the scandals on the crypto side of things. So understanding these obstacles, I think, is critical to scale blockchain solutions and have those partnerships with on the global stage. So I think first is the regulatory uncertainty. I think one of the biggest barriers is the lack of a clear, consistent regulation in Africa, at least. Some governments actively embrace blockchain, while others have banned it or restricted its use. So that creates a fragmented policy landscape. So what's needed is a unified regulation, regional. And actually, there is a good platform, the East Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA, that could play a role in harmonizing blockchain laws across Africa. There's also regulatory sandboxes are very useful, where startups can test blockchain solutions without fear of sudden legal changes. Those are very useful when you're starting new innovations. Engagement between policymakers and the blockchain innovators to create those risk mitigated policies are also very important. I mean, the second, I think, is the limited internet infrastructure and digital infrastructure that still plagues much of Africa. Blockchain relies on that internet connectivity, but there's still those infrastructure limitations. So the question, I guess, what's needed is, are governments and private sector investments happening in digital infrastructure? Are there more offline first blockchain solutions, which I don't see as much of when I go to the blockchain weeks across the globe? There seem to be cheaper mobile data and internet expansion efforts as well, which is what we can really benefit as well. And the third is a difficult one because it's banking resistance. Many African banks view blockchain as a threat. They fear the digital finance will undermine traditional banking. So what's needed is that dialogue between the fintech startups and traditional banks to create a regulated, compliant digital finance banking system. And regulatory frameworks that allow for licensed digital money exchanges to integrate within the banking system, which is still not there yet. And I think fourth is security risks and scams that erodes the public's trust in blockchain or blockchain-related solutions. So what's needed is consumer protection measures again. These are for digital assets, crypto trading. This is a global issue. We just heard about the hack of one of the crypto exchanges, and that's caused a lot of, again, global public trust erosion. So it's not an issue just for Africa, but it's something that Africa will have to tackle as well to protect its citizens and consumers. And then government-backed blockchain education programs, I think those are very useful as well. So to summarize, I think what's needed for blockchain in Africa is clear regulation and legal frameworks, infrastructure investment to improve internet access, and public education and trust building initiatives.
Especially the talk about regulations, that's ongoing, and but yeah, baby steps will get there. The future vision and call to action. So what's your vision for blockchain in Africa over the next decade? And what role can the audience play in driving blockchain's adoption?
So blockchain in Africa is at an inflection point. The past decade has seen the continent leapfrog the traditional financial technological models with the mobile money adoption in particular. That's just what a great example for Africa leading the world. And I think decentralized finance, DeFi, is another one, and the blockchain-based trade networks are gaining a lot of traction. So cross-border trade is becoming very big as well, and finding solutions. So looking ahead, I think the next phase of blockchain development in Africa was centered on stable coins. I think decentralized finance and trade integration, the tokenization of real assets is going to be very big. I know we're starting to see more of this. And central bank digital currencies, I think, will come with the battle for technological independence. So first, the era of digital currencies in Africa. So I'll be watching for will CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, work alongside or replace mobile money? Which countries will adopt CBDCs first for mass use? Can stablecoins like USDC or others create a more resilient, private sector-driven digital finance ecosystem? I think that's going to be the interesting ones. On second, I would say DeFi and microfinance will be expanded. So will DeFi transform access to credit savings for millions of Africans who lack formal access through the banks? So I'll be watching for, will DeFi replace traditional microfinance institutions, which have been there, but have very high fees as well? So DeFi could potentially reduce those fees. Can stablecoins make DeFi lending safer and more reliable, avoid the currency impacts as well? And how will governments regulate or integrate DeFi? It's still a big question out there. The third is supply chain and trade integration. So Africa is one of the largest trading regions in the world, yet inefficiencies cost it really costs businesses billions of dollars in lost revenue because but I think blockchain is set to revolutionize trade, and particularly with the potential for entities like the AfCFTA, the free trade area of Africa. And I think I'll be watching for whether AfCFTA integrates blockchain into its trade system. Can blockchain create the Pan-African digital trade infrastructure as well? Fourth, which I know you're very keen on as well, is tokenization of real assets, such as real estate, such as commodities and carbon credits. That's another big area because of climate change impact. So one of the most exciting developments for me also is the tokenization of real assets. So turning physical assets into digital tokens on a blockchain. On real estate, there's many African families struggling to buy land or property due to lack of access to formal financing. Blockchain-based tokenization allows for fractional ownership, where individuals can invest in a property without buying the entire unit. And I think there's this company called Landleby in Kenya, which I think uses blockchain to digitize land ownership records and then enables fractional land ownership. So there's some good examples already there. The second one is on commodities and agriculture tokenization. So Africa is rich in minerals, gold, oil, agricultural products. And blockchain can ensure transparent commodity trading and reducing of fraud. And farmers can tokenize their produce, securing these upfront payments before the harvest. So that can bring in financing if they can use their produce as collateral, for example, in a protected way. The one that I'm very interested in personally is carbon credits and climate finance. What I'm seeing is African nations are increasingly participate in the carbon credit market. I sit on a board of directors of the Trees for the Future entity, and I see firsthand here how farmers can leverage their land to generate carbon credits by adopting sustainable agricultural practices, the forest garden approach, for example, and that reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Then they can quantify and verify the carbon reductions through an accredited carbon credit program. Once verified, these credits can be sold on carbon markets to governments who are looking to offset their emissions. And that creates additional revenue stream for farmers while promoting climate resilience and also soil health. So it's really a win-win situation in terms of that model. South Africa, for example, is piloting tokenized carbon credits right now to attract global investors. Kenya has the Cello blockchain-based carbon credit program, and that pays farmers in digital tokens for their reforestation projects. So I'll be watching this space. I'm sure you all will as well very closely. What will blockchain-based property investments become mainstream is one question. And how will tokenized agriculture help smallholder farmers is another one. And maybe just to close, I would say Africa is really playing a big role in applying blockchain innovations to solve real-world problems, from the CBDCs to stablecoins and DeFi, asset tokenization. The next decade will really determine whether Africa becomes that global leader in blockchain or remains more dependent on some of the external technology providers. So the future of African transformation is definitely digital, and blockchain will be at its heart, in my prediction. But I will say this, that the question is not whether Africa will embrace blockchain, but how it will shape blockchain for its own future.
Wow. I think we could go on and on. It's feel like the time went by so fast. There's so much knowledge there to share. There's so many insightful information, and it's intriguing. And by the look of things, the audience also want to get their fair share of answers. So I think I'll have to leave some minutes for them to get their fair share of the answers that they're waiting for. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you on this chat today. You have unlocked a lot of potential and a lot of curiosity. We'll definitely dive in deeper into what you have just shared tonight. And yeah, I think I will hand over to my colleague Simi now to take over for the QA session. Over to you, Simi.
Thank you, Bombali. Really great chatting with you.
Great chatting to you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. So the first one is, how quickly will
Simi, your mic is far.
revolution?
We can't really hear you. Hello, Simi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We can't hear you very clearly.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Much
Yeah,
better.
it's better.
I said we have a couple of questions, and the first one is, how quickly will Africa lead blockchain revolution?
So that's a very important question, because we dived into many of the different potentials and potential roadblocks in terms of what can slow it down. It's not going to stop it. Africa is on the path to being a leader in terms of the digital landscape. And I think that with the statistic that we referred to earlier, that there's more working people in Africa more than the entire developed world. Think of that that amount of intelligence and power to create solutions. So to me, the question of how quickly Africa can lead blockchain is going to depend on whether we could have the grassroots aspects, whether we have startups, whether we have people just going and creating, which I'm seeing a lot more of actually, and that's very encouraging. You see a lot more solutions coming, a lot more energy in terms of young people also going out there and just creating solutions and then launching them. And that attracts financing then because people see the potential and capital then starts flowing in. So I think there's going to be some impediments because also when you have startups don't want to do too much without the regulation because they're afraid that if they create something and they go afoul of the regulation, then there can be penalties and there can be challenges. So I think we have to also look to see which countries are leading in terms of some of the digital solutions. We named a few countries that have done very well so far and have some good environments for startups and for technology in terms of blockchain and related technologies. So I think if you can get more of those solutions in these countries that are more proactive, I think more countries will follow. And then you have some Pan-African entities that try and support harmonizing on trade, free trade, in terms of regulations. We mentioned a few as well. So hopefully those entities are pushed. And I encourage young people to sit on these entities and participate in the discussions, to start moving the conversations towards that direction, to get more ability for startups to be able to create solutions, so African solutions for Africa. So I think that there's going to be, it's really a question mark, how quickly. There's no question it will move and it will move fast, but how quickly, and we want it all to move faster. So the more energy we have, the more we talk about it, the more we have even platforms like this with the African Blockchain Institute and others, providing a platform for more energy and more discussion on these topics. I think that can also start moving the needle. And then when you see examples, to be honest, the way it works is when you see real examples working, governments start noticing, and then they come on board, and then they realize that this has potential for their populations, and then they will change the regulations. So I think sometimes you almost have to work backwards instead of waiting for the regulations to start. You just have to move forward with solutions, like we've seen in some of the countries we mentioned. And then they get noticed, they get global recognition, they get national recognition, and then governments also come on board, and you have the public-private sector partnerships working together for the setting up the environment for the continent to lead, because there's no question to me with the number of people on the continent who are hungry for solutions and to do meaningful work and provide a better future for themselves and their families and their countries. It's going to be an unstoppable train.
All right. Thank you so much, Advit, for answering the question so seamlessly. We have a second question here, and it says, if we look at the whole continent, which countries do you think are most ready to adopt and implement blockchain at this current time, and why?
So without going into specific countries, I actually think there's some good resources that actually show the facts and the numbers. I would look at the Global Blockchain Business Council, the GBBC. I sit on it as an ambassador, but I know they come up with very interesting statistics that are based in fact and researched. And they actually provide platforms to show the different platforms and also some of the statistics that show the regulatory environment, for example, which ones have the most flexible regulatory environments. What's always interesting is to see where the innovations are coming out of, and then there's different aspects. One is the regulation, one is the innovation, one is the financing, one is the needs and the population. I mean, for example, Nigeria is embracing digital assets. because it's a good alternative to what is the current situation in terms of currency. And that's why you see about 60 billion in digital assets flowing by local Nigerians, because they see a need. People do what's good for them, what's beneficial to them. So if they find that something is created that will help them and reduce fees and help them move funds or help them protect their funds from inflation or reductions, they'll do it. The importance that we have to give to governments not banning those things, because of the moment the governments put some bans on those type of solutions, then we have to innovate again and create some other solutions. So I think the more I see Africa is, I see more and more leadership in Africa very open to these kind of solutions, very open to innovation, because they realize that to solve the problems that we have in the globe today, we need to be able to be innovative and allow innovation. So I know I haven't answered the question about which countries in terms of blockchain adoption, but I think that it's coming because globally this is a problem. It's not just in Africa. In fact, we're seeing that, look at the challenges that you're seeing in the United States about discussion about which direction to go. In Europe, which direction to go. Is MiCA the new rules on digital asset regulation? Are they helpful or they're not? Are they helpful to small businesses? Are they helpful to large? But so you're seeing a lot of the challenges, and I don't think there is a solution out there that fits every jurisdiction. But I think what we're seeing is that the more you find local solutions coming up, and I can say that I'm seeing a lot of solutions coming out of Nigeria, out of Ghana, out of South Africa, even Zambia. I see Kenya. I see, even West Africa. You see more solutions. So you do hear that solutions are coming out of certain regions and certain countries. And that's a good sign, because that also says that the regulation in terms of payments, in terms of assets, in terms of technology in general, and blockchain and AI, which is going to be another very sort of assisted to blockchain as we move into the new landscape with AI being everywhere, is going to be really a question that we'll need to answer. And I think one of the questions we posed and discussed earlier today was, will there be an Africa first solution? Because I think that's going to be important. Are we going to be able to see the data of people in the continent protected on the continent? Right now, the vast majority of data is sitting outside of Africa because it's on Google, Microsoft, Amazon servers. It's not sitting in Africa. So those are some of the real challenges that we're going to face, because that's and I know African leaders are very aware of this. I happened to meet many ministers of agriculture and finance during my time as the controller at IFAD and also with UNDP. And what I'm seeing, even in Davos, I met with the Minister of Trade of DRC Congo a few weeks ago. And the incredible openness to innovation is what really moved me, because I realized these are very smart people who know exactly their countries and know exactly how innovation can help their countries, and how bringing in international finance is also critical. Doing trade within Africa, cross-border across Africa. How come there's so little trade across African countries, whereas there's so many goods produced by each of the countries that there should be a natural partnership for trade? It's because the international systems are created in a way that doesn't support local first. And I think those are the kind of things that we have to fight for. We have to raise our voices. We have to talk to our government officials as well, to try and push the boundaries to make sure that we have the environment that's basically supporting the continent and the countries.
Thank you so much, Mr. Advit. Speaking about needs, this one last question says, what is one person needs that millions of Africans suffer from and can be addressed with blockchain for profitability, sustainability, and social impact?
Thank you, Simi. So was the question about what is a real world problem that can be solved with blockchain, or that has a feasibility? And yes. So I think there can be many solutions because the problems are many. So while I can give you one or two that will be probably most dominant because they solve some of the bigger sort of the problems that many people face, I think there'll be many of these. So definitely on the payment side in terms of currency, money, because that's what everyone's minds. And you can see inflation becoming a big issue. So I think through stable coins and cross-border transactions is going to be very big because it's just the nature of financial security for everyone. But I think that's the easy one because it's sort of the top of people's minds. But the important ones are the ones that we should be also focusing and not losing sight of: education, healthcare, and how can blockchain be used for examples in education, healthcare, land, agriculture. Even the Ghana example where land is basically recorded on a blockchain. So you have a registry that's on a blockchain, and that means that farmers and communities and people have their land properly recorded in public records that anyone can go to, and there's less disputes. That gives a certain level of security, a certain level of property rights, for example. That then is a basis, a foundation for growing businesses, for growing farms to become more to become bigger and then be able to support the economy more in terms of overall income levels. So I was talking to my business colleague today in the morning, and he was saying that every day he speaks to someone else and there's another use case for using blockchain. He was literally saying every day there's another use case for using blockchain. And I feel the same way that I don't believe that the technology should be the first step and that should fit the solution. I think blockchain is useful for many things, maybe not everything. So you have to start with the problem and find the right solution for the problem and the right technology for the problem. It may be AI, it may be drones, it may be Internet of Things, it may be other solutions, technology solutions. But I think that for Africa, blockchain can be used in so many different ways to solve the energy issues, to solve the food security issues, to solve the health issues, to solve educational issues. And I actually think we should have the millions of smart people out there working on some of these solutions, which I think they're already starting to, and finding ways to work together to crowd in finance, to be able to find other solutions, share what worked for them. I just talked to recently one of my colleagues. She's from Nepal, and she started her own blockchain-based company, and she found some funding through Stellar Development Fund. So it was great to speak to her because she gave some real solutions of how she managed to get funding. And then I told some of my other colleagues of how they can then use that same approach. So sharing information among startup owners to be able to work together, and we're in this together to solve real world problems. I think that's where the energy is. And go to some of these networking events, go to the different blockchain solution events that are or platforms that are out there, that even like this one here, but others as well. And that brings us into a community, and then we can start finding a lot more traction as a continent. It's surprising that we don't have that kind of full traction that I see in other continents, for example, when I go to some of these other different events around the world. So I really encourage Africa and the startup owners to really start doing as much as you can do to also share and exchange as much as possible. I saw some really excellent Africa First company CEOs and founders in Davos, and they were there speaking in front of hundreds of people about the solutions they created and how they worked.
Thank you so much, Advit. Okay, so I have two more questions. Why is blockchain important for Africans, and how do we learn it from scratch?
So that's a great question.
Okay.
Sorry, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to know if you got the question.
Yes. So why is blockchain important for Africans, and how can we learn it from scratch? So let me start with why it's important is because blockchain is going to be the backbone of every financial transaction in the next few years. It will be the basis for everything that we do. That's my prediction, and it's probably not going to be far off, just because it's such a powerful technology. And just remember, I'm not saying it's cryptocurrency, because blockchain is the technology behind crypto. It's one of the use cases of crypto amongst hundreds of use cases. Unfortunately, because crypto gets a lot of visibility in the media, people just associate and think they are the two, but I'm sure this audience knows that very well. So I'm really talking about blockchain. And why I say blockchain is because it's not the traceability piece of blockchain that's useful. It's the smart contracts piece of blockchain. It's the ability to computerize, to write a program to execute a transaction on a blockchain. And now with AI, you can have AI agents basically operating on a blockchain and creating all the infrastructure and keeping it operational. So it's made blockchain much more easier. I know it's a complicated area, and that's one of the biggest challenges of blockchain, and why I think it hasn't scaled much more quickly than we expected it to have, is because it's hard to code blockchain until now. But it's been hard to code blockchain, and there's a lot of different it's technically a bit complicated if you don't know it. So why is it important for Africa? Because I think Africa should be at the forefront of technology, because it has proven that it can do that. And not only that, it can create solutions for the rest of the world, like M-Pesa, like mobile money, for example. And why should Africa not be at the forefront of the technological revolution? Because it can solve many of the problems, not all, but it can solve many of the problems much more quickly and much more effectively at much lower cost. And we're even challenging the paradigms of cost of technology. We saw that the solution DeepSeek from China, for example, that basically said it created the same thing for 5 million that it took 5 billion by an American company to create. Think of that, right? So the point being that why can't more solutions? And I think there are many that we just don't talk about. We just don't have enough platforms to speak about in terms of African innovations that are global. So I think it's going to be important for Africans because it can help solve real world problems for communities, for people in Africa, and the rest of the world as well. So how to learn it? To be honest, I was in the same situation, and I'm still learning. I never knew blockchain before, and what I realized is that if even though I'm an accountant by profession, so I understand the concepts of a ledger that tracks everything, traces everything, but it's still mind-blowing in terms of how it works, and it's never been hacked, and it can solve problems that you've never had solved before. So I see it as a supercharged ledger in its simplicity, and I think the way to do it is start with just sandboxing it. So there's some very nice courses on, I don't know if you use LinkedIn, but LinkedIn Learning, it used to be called lynda.com. There's some really good courses on the basics of blockchain. So I encourage you to start by just looking at any basic courses. You don't have to read books to become good at blockchain. And then you decide which ones you want to focus on. There's Ethereum has probably the most developers, and there's a language called Solidity that is the one that is used for to code Ethereum. You can now use AI, and that's why I said until now, blockchain, it was very complicated, but AI can be used to code Solidity. So you can, in natural English language, you can speak to what you want to do, and it will, the AI can then create a code for it. Now, this gets a bit more complicated than the average user, the person who's not technologically savvy. So if you're not technologically savvy, you can always buy in these kind of services. I was just talking to a colleague in Uganda who's basically offering services to be able to help code on a blockchain at a very low cost, because Africa is still early stages. So if you go to India and get those services, it will be probably 10 times the cost, if not more. So you can find much cheaper solutions with very good talent in Africa, homegrown, who understand also the problems. So I think you can find ways to outsource or to learn blockchain through some of the resources, free resources actually out there. I would say don't pay for anything on blockchain or AI. There's so many free resources that you can get that you should use to be able to learn a little bit, understand a little bit of basics, and then also to be able to support your solutions in terms of blockchain in the area.
Thank you, Advit, for sharing more light on where we can learn blockchain. This last question says, okay, there is no how you're going to mention blockchain and not mention Bitcoin or tokenization in general. So how can we make blockchain more environmentally friendly, considering that is the main architect backing Bitcoin as proof of work, which affects the environment through mining? I would wish blockchain could be a green, could be as green as possible. Can you share more light on that?
Yeah, that's an important question because a lot of us have climate change and the impact on climate in mind, and we all want to be more climate friendly. So one thing I'm happy to say is that many blockchains are very green. So Ethereum basically moved to reduce its energy footprint by 99% by moving towards a different blockchain modality called proof of stake, rather than the mining concept that was there for Bitcoin, where you have to have these massive number of computing power to be able to solve mathematical problems, and that requires a lot of energy, which then is bad for the environment. So there are a lot of new blockchains coming that basically are very green and environmentally friendly, and that's the direction it's going. Unfortunately, AI is also taking up a lot of energy now because of these training models. And you think of the many billions of dollars being spent to train AI models. So I think in terms of the technology, you could feel comfortable that there's many blockchains that are green. If you just do a quick search, you'll find them all. And I think it's not going to be one of those things that that will go in the wrong direction. I think it's all going in the right direction, where we're now also seeing more renewable energy sources being used for the powering of some of the blockchains. So I think if you use renewables to power blockchains, and they have a modality of blockchains that's more proof of stake, for example, or something similar, where it's not about using the more computer energy to solve problems, but having a more efficient mechanism to solve problems. That's the way to go. So I would say that in terms of the environment, it's less of a concern for me at this point. I think there's many ways we can solve some and work towards trying to help with the environment. So I think we need to do all of those things and continuously push to have blockchains that are more green and friendly as well. And I think, these things are now also, there is a reality check. I always feel that, I'm also very personally very conscious of the environment, and I try and make decisions in my day-to-day life to try and reduce my impact on the environment. And there's some things that, if we, what's the positives of the technology and can it help in a certain way? And if the answer is yes, it can have a lot more benefit to support a lot more people, then I think the answer is let's use those technologies. And then let's still find ways to solve the climate crisis that is there as well. And in fact, blockchain can be used to help support in terms of ESG emissions and to solve some of those issues that we have as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Advit. We don't have any more questions. So I'll be passing the mic to my colleague, Simulai, to take the closing remark. Simulai, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nat. I know we don't want this session to end. We can go on and on and on and on. And for me, it has been really thought-provoking. I mean, all the insights that you've shared. There's a question that keeps coming to mind. We've really come a long way in terms of blockchain in Africa, but your session opened minds and open us to see that there is still much more to be done. We are just scratching the surface. There are many more questions to be answered. There are many more paths to tread, and also you've inspired hope and faith that Africa is really at the forefront. We are not coming behind, we are at the forefront, and we just need to move very quickly, to move faster, and to keep, to close the gap that we currently have. And we are very grateful to have you. I think there is a comment that was asking about your project, nutrition. Um, you could share us the link, possibly now, or you could share with me later, and I'll pass it on to them. And they are also asking for your LinkedIn profile. I mean, it's really, really, really an insightful session. I guess we have another one to, to continue where you stopped. And we've been able to look at where we are currently in Africa. We've explored real solution, real innovation, real transformation, what we are really doing. And I'm glad that you're also someone that is hands-on in this aspect of blockchain. You are part of those building the solution, and we are grateful that you are able to help us see where we are currently and what we should do. And I'm sure for as many builders that are in the house, they've gotten answers. They've also gotten direction on what we should be looking at, what areas we should be looking at. I mean, I was at the bank yesterday to perform some transaction, and I wore a t-shirt that has blockchain on it. You know what the banker asked me? He was like, "Oh, you are one of the crypto people." I was just laughing, like, I didn't know how to answer, because apparently you are a banker and you, of all people, should know what blockchain is. So there's something that you mentioned, that there should be government-backed blockchain education program, and I think that that's one way to really move the needle forward. I know private sectors, private institutions can do their own bit, but once we have the backing of the government providing support for this initiative to talk about blockchain, and then we have more traction in the education side, many more people will begin to understand what this technology can do, and they will also get hands-on. You also mentioned the fact that to develop blockchain solution is difficult. I mean, to code is difficult, and we're seeing that we need more developers in the space that can help us bring our ideas to life. So in case you are on the call and you are in Web 2, this is also a call for you. You've seen the opportunities, the potential, you have understanding. This is a call for you to begin to explore your interest in Web3, consider taking courses in Solidity and all of that. So, I mean, I could go on the nudges that that you've shared with us this evening. Another one that you talk about is dialogue between the fintech and the traditional finance bank, and I think that's really, really important, because as Africans we need real quick solutions that can fast track cross-border transaction. You know, you're trying to get money from somebody in the neighboring country and it's already an headache. So we need as urgent as possible, but not working in silos in terms of fintech. We need the collaboration between the fintech and the traditional financial institution. So thank you very much. Please, if there's any take home that you have, you can drop it in the comment section. As we have heard in the session today, what we need to do is to keep talking about it, to collaborate with others to build product and solution. There was also something that he keep mentioning every time he's sharing example. He said he regularly speak with his partner, maybe a colleague. So there is always a conversation ongoing with someone that keep the interest alive, keeps the fire burning. So find a community, and African Blockchain Institute is also a place where you can engage in this conversation. We have upcoming events that you should be part of. We have publications that we have written to explore the real use cases of blockchain. We have concept notes, articles, opinion papers that we have written, and you can find us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on X, and you can also look us up as our website, African Blockchain Institute. You get more information about some of our upcoming events. So you can follow Advit on LinkedIn. Sorry, yeah, he has already dropped his link. I can see that already. So just follow him right there. I mean, it's really, really mind blowing. It's someone that you want to follow. You want to see what's going on with his project and every other thing. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We catch up on the next one. If there's anybody in the comment section or the call that you've connected with, I mean, just connect with them and keep the interaction going. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Nat, for honoring our invitation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tamlin. Thank you, everyone. It was really a pleasure and all the best. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, sure.